All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. As I promised, this is a short video I'm going to upload, which will give just a little bit more information about the sample problem and pick up where we left off in class. So, as you remember, we were talking about really the end of the exam, and there's a couple of paragraphs that we just hadn't gotten to. So. In the second paragraph on the second page of the exam problem, I indicate that in addition to establishing WA, WI established another entity called the Wilmington Innovation Limited Partnership, WILP. It's a limited partnership that is going to work under WI's direction. WI is going to be the GP, the general partner of the limited partnership, of WILP, the limited partnership. And as a general partner, it'll earn the standard 2 and 20 fee that we discussed in class. So what's going on here is that you've got WILP, which is essentially acting as a fund, and WI is the investment advisor to the fund, the common structure that we discussed in class, where the limited partner is effectively the investment advisor to the fund structure. But there's a problem here, and that's what I'm hoping students would isolate on the exam and discuss. So the problem is that WI is effectively choosing which companies to invest in, right? It's got to decide, which companies are we going to invest in for this fund. But it is also choosing which companies to recommend to investors as good investments, right? Because it also plays that role. So this, of course, presents a conflict because WI might base its recommendations to the fund, right, with respect to which companies the fund should invest in. It might base those decisions on which companies it is also recommending to investors to invest in. Now you might say, well, why is that a problem, right? If it's a good company, that's great, right? It'll just recommend that company to the fund. It's also recommending that company to investors. But it's a problem because it might decide that it's going to basically focus on, say, one particular company, recommend only that company or a series of companies to investors. It then knows that investors are pouring money into that company. And it then knows that, all right, it's going to recommend that particular company to the fund over others because that particular company is getting an influx of capital and will be able to perform better, right? So it has knowledge and information that the general public doesn't have. But more importantly, it's just a straight conflict of interest, right? It might be recommending companies not that are necessarily in the best interest of the fund, but it's companies that it understands are getting an influx of capital, right, from other investors. And so it's making recommendations based on something other than just a straight, what's in the best interest of the investor. Now, as I say, this might not be nefarious, right, but it might be, right? So at a minimum, and this is, I think, a point for much of the discussion we've had during the semester, at a minimum, you would want disclosure, right? You would want disclosure to the fund board, and you would want disclosure to investors that WILP, and in particular, the investment advisor, WI, is basically playing both of these roles, right? It's got a fund and it's making recommendations to a fund, but it's also making recommendations to investors. Might not present a conflict, should not present a conflict, but there's at least a potential conflict of interest that should be disclosed. So it's a subtle point, right? Again, it's not one that was a deal breaker for those who did not notice it on the exam. But anytime you see an investment advisor playing multiple roles or advising different kinds of clients, you might want to think about whether there's a potential conflict and whether it should be disclosed. So that's it. Relatively short video. Tried to keep this under 5 minutes. We can talk about it more on Monday if you wish.